Brent prowled forward, his gaze fixed on the beast ahead. A towering behemoth, a mountain of muscle covered in scales and spikes. Brent adjusted the axe in his hand. The sun beat down on his exposed skin. It was time. With a mighty roar, he rushed forward. Fueled by unfettered rage, he swung his oversized axe again and again. No hesitation, just blind fury. Attack after attack. The beast let out a final wail as it fell to the ground. The barbarian stood above it, looking down on his kill. Growls and clicks drew his attention to the forest around him. Several more of the large beasts pressed in, ready to take revenge on the barbarian. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. Today, we are taking a look at the Barbarian class, which are found in all fantasy games and books. Let's see if these muscular warriors are real or just an exaggeration. The Barbarian. Muscular warriors which rush into battle, wielding weapons as big as themselves, empowered by rage and adrenaline, a terror on the battlefield. That is how the barbarian is often portrayed, but how accurate is it? The term barbarian originates from the Greeks as barbario, but later adopted by the Romans. It meant a person who was not Greek, later Roman, and then non-Christian, who spoke a different language. It was mostly used to describe Persians and Median people. It was after the Persian Wars that it gained a negative connotation, a term for foreigner. By the 1400s, it meant someone who was rude and a wild person, uneducated, no interest in culture or art. It was considered a slight improvement over savage. Or it meant as a reference to the barbaric coast of North Africa. Now, does that match the class we have in fantasy settings? Not at all. The modern barbarian archetype comes from a combination of Vikings mixed with parts of Celts, Germanic, Gaul, and the Huns. So how did we get here? Barbarian eventually became used to describe enemies. First Persians to Greek, then others to Rome. Those they faced were Huns, Gauls, and Germanic forces. By the Middle Ages, this list included non-Christian groups like the Vikings, or slavers from the barbaric coast. Viking warriors were often portrayed as savages and imposing figures in later years, and a heavy influence in our modern culture, the berserkers being the most feared of them. These warriors date back to the Roman era. According to their depictions, they would fight bare-chested and barefooted, with helmets and weapons. Some were mercenaries allied with Rome, or others their enemies. Their helmets are described as being made from wolf or bear pelts. Berserker supposedly meant bare skin, while the wolf warriors had another name. The Celts were another group known to fight with little more than a shield and a belt for protection. While they fought, berserkers would succumb to fits of savagery. They'd foam at the mouth, howl, gain unnatural strength, and immunity to iron and fire. Or so it is said. Well, we know how they did this. Drugs. Hallucinogenic mushrooms with other ingredients mixed in. So, a warrior fueled by rage. That part seems to match up pretty much. It's said that afterwards, the berserkers would be weak, tired, and lethargic. Hopefully, the fight was over, else they would be easy targets. There is an answer to the insane strength, but poorly researched. I'm sure you've all heard of hysterical strength, a phenomenon where you find yourself with nearly limitless strength, where a grandmother can lift a car suddenly. The reason this is poorly studied is because of the ethics of putting people in true life-threatening situations. One theory is that not all muscle fibers are firing at once. Normally, when you do a bicep curl, for example, only part of the muscle fibers contract while others rest, and then they switch back and forth. This prevents them from getting fatigued as fast. So if they all go at once, you get a lot of strength at once, but then are fatigued and run a high risk of injury. Sound familiar? Another option is woad, the blue paint from the Celtic warriors. The name comes from a plant, that was used to give it the blue pigment. This wasn't just smeared on though. The intricate patterns held meanings. Between a fight for your life and hallucinogenic mushrooms, this explains much of their combat. They only seemed to withstand fire and blades. Truth was, they probably couldn't feel pain. And that's bad. Pain is considered a vital sign medically. If you are feeling pain, something is wrong. On the battlefield, it tells you that you are injured. That is something you need to respond to. This means there's a good chance that many of them would die. So what we usually see as the Barbarian class in games is more of a portrayal of the Berserkers. The Berserkers fought without armor, but Viking and Hun raiders did have armor, padded gambeson and chainmail being common. Their use of weapons varies with times, and does cover all range: swords, axes, maces, clubs, halberds, spears, bows, and crossbows. Much of the origins of how we see the barbarian comes from pop culture, particularly the writings of Robert E. Howard back in 1932 through 1969. In his works, Conan the Barbarian was shown as a brutish warrior who often wore chainmail and was as smart as he was strong. Though the modern movies show him shirtless, who doesn't love a little fan service? He learned from his travels and developed many skills. It was these stories which helped create our modern idea of the barbarian. What skills and abilities should a barbarian really have? One thing that almost all games leave out is sailing and horsemanship. The Vikings were amongst the most accomplished sailors of their time, and the Huns were renowned horsemen. So, if we are being accurate, those should be skills of the barbarian class. Since the frenzied trance is based in alchemy, it probably wouldn't be wrong for the barbarian to have a talent in such things. If we add in the Celtic woad paint, then it would be a serious thing in them. In fact, barbarians would potentially be as much a faith class as a warrior. So, how would a real barbarian society work in a fantasy world? Societies have an outcast group isn't anything new. One society seeing another as inferior is common. It helps justify conflicts. Thus, the origins of the word or a similar one would be obvious. But the warriors themselves, that is a little harder to say. Can physical strength overcome magic? Would there be foes where muscle and skill overcome magic? I think so. We have already talked about the manticore, a beast which is impervious to steel weapons, and most fantasy games have some sort of spell-eating monster to face, or a spell which prevents other magic. Yes, under any of these conditions, a barbarian would be able to keep pace with a wizard. More so if the spellcasters are limited in spells per day, or how long it takes to cast a spell. But would they be effective? In battling monsters, you need to be able to reach them. With the enhanced speed and strength from the frenzy, they should be able to get in close, dodge attacks, and get through the defenses of the monsters. Of course, you still need the right weapon. If this is a world of magic, then there are magic weapons. How those work depends on the setting though. An enchanted weapon could turn their already impressive strength to one that rivals the mightiest of monsters. And armor? Sure, they fight with nothing on. Probably not. Even light protection is better than no protection. Without armor, you should be lighter and faster, yes. But gambeson would at least be better. It would shrug off claws and spines, and some poisons. But in a fantasy world, the woad paint could provide magical protection, a form of mage armor, or provide a healing factor. Yes, it can help bypass the disadvantage of lacking armor. Honestly, I'd still go with solid armor versus a potion on the skin. Else it could be washed off with a water spell. In many fantasy settings, barbarians are shown with spikes on their armor. That isn't just for aesthetics. How many giant serpents or tentacled monsters have we looked at thus far? Spikes are a common trick used by animals to defend themselves against larger predators. Tentacles and snakes will get cut if they try and wrap around you. If a large animal tries and swallows you, the spikes should bring some pain. It might let you stab it in a sensitive part on the way down. Get a gag reflex and escape to safety. Now, I mentioned that there might be a spiritual aspect to the barbarian. The use of their abilities are portrayed as being fueled by unbridled rage and open to bloodlust. But in a fantasy world, there are gods that walk amongst men. It could be fairly easy for their trances to be a result of a blessing from a god of war or madness. The woe painting could be a way to identify the god which they serve. Overall, it would seem that the barbarian does fit in well into a fantasy world, but lacks several features and details which should be part of their innate skills. How effective they really would be really depends on the level of magic available in the world. So, would they multi-class, so to speak? Divide the time you spend honing your skills or learning new skills. In Conan the Barbarian, he mastered many different skills which allowed him to escape places he otherwise wouldn't. I think it would be advantageous to add their skill sets. Now, the term barbarian included the idea of being illiterate. That was only when compared to Greek and Roman cultures. The Vikings had their writing in the form of runes, art of song. So, by their cultural standards, they were cultured individuals. I'm sure some of you have heard the medieval peasants couldn't read and were illiterate. But that isn't true. By their standards, I'm betting you would be illiterate. You see, in the medieval ages, you had to be able to speak, read, and write in Latin. After that, it became French you needed. So, who here is an illiterate barbarian? I am. Would a barbarian be useful in a party? For many adventurers, that is an important detail. A lone adventurer is a dead one, right? How would they fight in a group? Barbarians are close-quarter fighters. They want to be up front. They could work as a distraction that gets your foe's attention. I mean, a large muscular figure jumping down is going to get your attention, right? If you are the party's rogue, you can sneak around while everyone is distracted. But a big yelling guy may throw off your bard's rhythm. Also, a large fighter up front may make it harder for your ranged fighters to line up a shot. Unless your archer can make arrows curve, you'll probably shoot your partner in the back. Maybe they should have a piece of plate armor on in the back to prevent this. This will also be a problem for your spell slingers. They'll have the same problem as the archers, and another one. Area of effect attacks may strike their ally. Your allies won't like having a fireball thrown into your back. They'll need to aim more carefully. Even if they can't feel pain, they can still get injured. But the barbarian has other uses. A terrifying guard for a royal estate. Someone who can go and intimidate those you are speaking with. Having a little muscle when trying to negotiate can be so useful. So long as that muscle means something. I mean, the buffest human in history isn't going to intimidate a minotaur, but a scrawny human could intimidate a gnome just off of size. Got to love perspective here. That brings up the question of whether different races would be as effective as a barbarian. Could a halfling be as good as a minotaur warrior? One of them would be much more terrifying to be charged at by. Having something the size of an 8-year-old run at me wouldn't have the effect of something twice my size. It doesn't take that much force to cut through skin though. But getting through heavy armor may be more difficult. Weapons are force multipliers, and a halfling wouldn't be as strong as a human or an orc. Even more important when you add in reach. The real issue could be how others view your party member. If barbarians in fantasy worlds are seen the same way as the Greeks saw them, then the nobles may be less inclined to speak with you, seeing you as nothing but a savage brute, unfit for civilization. But if the barbarian is just a class of warrior, under that condition, they may be seen like paladins. Sure, less noble, but just as effective as dealing with threats. What say you? Does this sound like how they would work in a real fantasy world? Brent raised his mug up high. He was still speckled with blood, some his, but mostly from the beasts, all dead. A bounty being well spent on food and drink. Tomorrow, he'd find another job, another beast, another battle. Tonight, he would celebrate. A good time, a life well spent indeed. The barbarian is a staple of the fantasy genre, with some accuracies to their history, but a definite asset to any party in battle. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next week for the Kishi. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.